I can't hear you on stream. That's the problem.
Wait, has it been the whole time?
No.
Just now? Okay. I don't know. I didn't change any of my settings. Um, how am I doing now? Can you hear me?
I think you're good.
Yeah.
Maybe it cut out briefly.
Was I good before this? Yeah, I saw. I could see the bar wasn't moving, but I wasn't watching earlier. I hope it wasn't cut the whole time. Okay. We'll see. I'll have to look back at the VOD and see if it's usable. Okay. So I think you can take responsibility for something without, other people necessarily holding you accountable. I feel like I have some responsibility to speak out against the things that I see Israel doing wrong because I see them representing something about like the Jewish spirit. And at the same time, I would ask people not to hold Jews in general across the world responsible for the actions of Israel. Um, if for no other reason than we can't just simply control the actions of Israel. Me as an American Jew, I can't just tell Israel to do something different. Um, so I'm lobbying my government to try to interact with Israel differently. I'm speaking out about my viewpoint because it's a little bit, people have to call me a self-hating Jew rather than simply an anti-Semite. If they want to shut down the reasonable criticisms that I have of Israel. So for those reasons, I speak out.
Person to the day school, and I'm like the second, I won't even say anything to my manager. I'm gone because that's just what I'm gonna have to do, and I have that over my head constantly, and I have nothing to do with it. He certainly doesn't have anything to do with it. Something happening an ocean away has a cascading effect on my life, and it's just I agree. It's totally unfair, and I just don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, none of it should happen. The thing is, it is, but like I think talking about the experience is important.
Yeah, I mean, the question of whether or not it should be the case, of course it shouldn't be the case, but it is the case. And so, given that it's the case, my answer to it is actually that I think I personally would probably be safer if Israel didn't exist. Because I personally am an example of a person who, my family had already moved here prior to the Holocaust, and therefore we personally
It's a good point,
were already
yeah.
safe. And so, therefore, the fact that Israel has forced the conversation around Jews to the forefront has put a focus on Jews in America in a way that it probably wouldn't exist otherwise. But on the other hand, I think that the overwhelming majority of the Jews who live in Israel would literally be dead if they weren't in Israel. And so the question of whether it's safer for me or not isn't really a question that I'm comfortable, seeing as the most relevant question when comparing it to the question of whether Jews as a whole would be safer with or without Israel, to which the obvious answer is that we would be far less safe as a whole without Israel.
Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
Rabbi Michael Skoback, Orthodox rabbi in Canada. It sounds familiar. Michael Skoback. Jews for Judaism staff, Michael Skoback. Missionaries and cults. Jews for Judaism. Wait, yeah, Jews for Judaism. Is this like a counter to Jews for Jesus? Yeah, yeah. Counter missionary work. Oh, that's great. Jews for Jesus is so weird. I don't know if anybody's ever read their like pamphlets, but they're so strange. Counter missionary. This is pretty cool. Oh, this seems great. Embrace Christian. Well, count as Jewish souls, but yeah, I mean, look, if somebody wants to convert to Christianity and they're Jewish, like, have at it. Go ahead. It's great to rescue people from cults. It's great to help people not be pressured, but I don't see it as like, you know, just in general, you need to be rescued from Christianity. If you marry a Christian girl, you want to be Christian, whatever. Like that's, go ahead. Orthodox Jews might disagree with Christian theologically, tend to be ultra conservative, I believe. Yeah, there's something to that. But that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it's specifically named to counter Jews for Jesus, which is a strange cult. I've interacted with them a little bit. They have weird pamphlets.
I think what should be acknowledged is the reason why this conversation seems so difficult is because there's kind of not really a situation similar to it in that it's kind of a U.S. sanctioned ethno-state, and I mean that with all of the nuance that requires, because I understand why an ethno-state is kind of required. Like I'm totally sympathetic to the reason why we feel like we need to have our own borders and have our own state and have our own government. I mean, my grandfather came from Poland to escape the Holocaust. I assume that almost every single person on this planet, on this panel, has family who were killed in the Holocaust. And
yeah,
I think that we
I was
all
gonna ask how many people had were the relatives or the grandchild of a survivor.
Yeah, and I'm a grandchild of a survivor, and like that is that like I understand why we feel the need for an ethno-state, but I also understand that like I ethically am just kind of anti-segregationist. I don't think that that's a long-lasting bridge to peace. I don't think that setting up borders. You said something at the very beginning that I thought was kind of interesting, where you said like, well, here's where we feel safe. Israel's where we feel safe. And my rebuttal to that is, are they safe? I mean, like,
Alive,
because
first
like
we have to be alive in order to make
no,
this.
no. What I'm trying to say is,
Well,
hold on. Let Staxians finish his question.
we should acknowledge that they are at the center of like 6 different enemies geopolitically, right? You got like just looking at the basic area, and we should look at the Hamas attacks. They killed 1,200 people. I think like I guess what I'm saying is there's constant violence at their borders, and I don't think that they are safe there either.
They're only there.
Well, let's let
I'm not disagreeing with that.
I see your super chats. I'll get to your super chats after we get through this, right? So $10.
Yeah, they were only there because they were forced out of Ethiopia. I don't know so much about like this other projects. Other than Jesus, I really don't know if there's a substantial difference between your average Baptist Republican and your average Orthodox Jew in America. I don't know so much about like Baptist specifically, but you're talking about like politically. I mean, religiously, there's a ton of difference. They're pretty, very very distinct religions. In terms of politics, yeah, I'm not sure.
And we'll answer this later, but I'll read it now. $10 from Lawson Harrison. Would Jewish people be more safe if Israel didn't exist or if Islam doesn't exist? But we'll talk about that later. I wanted to hear Goat's response to that, right? I wanted to hear Goat and Quibble.
Yeah, talk about a kind of like no-win comparison. This is, I think this is helping highlight for me why I started to get more and more uncomfortable with the kind of like new atheist, anti-religious, especially when it started like focusing more and more on Islam, is that it's just, I get suspicious when these kind of, like vague theoretical out there questionings happen to align really strongly with U.S. foreign policy. It makes me stop and think, things that make you go, Theologically, there's a lot of difference based on if you're on Torah observances, the Messiah. Politically and culturally, I think Orthodox Jews tend to believe in like anti-gay stuff. Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, I think, to some extent, there's something to be said with respect to liking Israel, even, or the fact that it's like, relatively, a lot of military victories. In some ways more conservative. So not everybody knows this, but Israel doesn't have gay marriage. It doesn't even have secular marriage. It's like Orthodox Jewish marriage only. I think if you can like leave the country and get married and come back, but to get married in Israel, if you're Jewish, you have to do like an Orthodox marriage. I saw recently on Twitter Michael Skobach retweeting the Republican War Room attacking Rashida Tlaib. Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. Censoring the only... Wait, she was the Palestinian congresswoman, right, who was speaking out and got censored? Censured?
And, actually, Goat, Mono, and Rafi, you are all in Israel, right? So I want you to respond to that.
Okay,
I
don't think that you can say that Israel, like Jews would be safer if Israel didn't exist. That statement is, I don't know, it's kind of weird, because anti-Semitism after World War II didn't really disappear, okay, from Europe, and saying that like if all these Jews that survived the Holocaust like had no place to go, they would just stay there. I don't know, like it's just
sorry, I just want to be clear about what I specifically said. I was not addressing a counterfactual in that Israel wouldn't exist and we would be somehow safer, or that suddenly like this would be a better situation. All I'm trying to like look at is the specific situation right here. Jews still aren't safe in Israel. That's all I'm trying to say. Like that's not.
I think they're safer than in Israel than in Europe. Okay,
Sure.
because when I walk on the
Wait.
streets of Israel, I know that people are going to protect me. Okay, that we have our army that protects me, like protects us. Okay, we have so many systems at place that work in order to protect every Jewish civilian, and this does not exist abroad. Okay, like in Europe, you can walk on the street and someone can just do like a hate crime towards you, and like there are no systems that are up for like handling this, okay, or preventing this. I feel safer walking the streets in Israel than in Europe, at least right now, because although yes, we're having like lots of bombings and stuff like that, but still I don't have to fear that someone's gonna like knife me down in an alley.
Yeah,
okay?
I can see what you're saying.
That's a fear that I do not have.
Yeah, I
don't have to fear people. I don't have to fear like being scared of walking in a pro-Palestinian protest and being harassed. I don't have to fear that because everybody here are like.
And Bear, you live in Israel, right?
Yes.
I guess my question is like I don't know why you guys were frustrated that I didn't fear for my life when I live in Utah, America. But like I mean, especially after October 7th, I don't know how you don't fear for that. You know what I'm saying? Like when like a music festival gets.
It's a very different fear than if I would go back to my my ancestral homeland of Poland, and people could just pogrom me and nothing, and no one would stand up for me.
I think it's a fear of different types.
And there are no law.
I want to point.
Yeah, these are very different types of fears. So it's like it's more of so. The thing that I can imagine is, as an Israeli, it's kind of a national fear. You're all in it together. You're not fearing your compatriots. You're not fearing the people right around you. Although, I think there have been hate crimes in Israel against Palestinian Israelis, and I assume there is some tension there. But I think you don't feel like the majority of people or the state is going to turn on you in the way that you might fear that in Europe. That can make a huge difference toward the feeling of safety. From what I understand, there's some people who complain that in Israel, a portion of ultra-Orthodox Jewish men don't have secular jobs and study the Talmud and Hebrew Bible in yeshivas. Right, and those ultra-Orthodox can often get out of army service, even though those are a lot of the people who are pushing the settlements. So you have people who are pushing something that creates a need for more national security and are not willing to serve because they say, we're doing our service by studying the Torah. So that there's some rift there for sure within Israel. It'd be curious, actually. I don't know. It's not exactly on topic for this panel, but I'd be curious with more hearing more Israeli people talk about that. I have a pretty limited kind of viewpoint into what that's like within their society.
Something else.
I'm very curious.
Of being persecuted by the majority of a single country.
Yeah.
By being a minority in a single country or whatever entity, and being persecuted.
And you can't predict it. You can't even predict these attacks.
You can't predict that it will happen because it's never stopped happening. That's why Jewish people will not be safer without Israel.
I also kind of like to touch on this idea of the ethno-state. I have a big issue when people bring up this idea that we should oppose Israel or Zionism because
well done, Wick.
I mean, the majority of countries in the world are ethno-states. Right?
Yeah,
it's a flat-out majority of the world.
absolutely.
So I fail to see why. But being like a legally written down requirement is meaningless when it's effectively true, right? If the country enforces it, if it is not possible for someone who's not a part of the majority ethnic group to ever come to power in that country, it's functionally an ethno-state, right? If people are given not as many rights because they're not of the same ethnicity, that's an ethno-state. It doesn't matter if legally you might be able to give them a lot of money and immigrate there, right? The majority of countries in the world are ethno-states. I don't really see anything inherently wrong with an ethno-state. I think that sometimes we have problems with the way the governments function, but I don't think that something being an ethno-state inherently means that it's going to be unethical. We can definitely envision very ethical ethno-states and very unethical non-ethno-states, right?
I mean, I could absolutely agree.
What you mean by ethno-state here, because it is certainly true that Israel is an ethnic majority Jewish state, but the question of being an ethnic majority something and being an ethno-state, I think, are different things. When I think of an ethno-state, I think of somewhere where people who are not part of that ethnicity have been forced out, and there is no minority who is not of that type. And so when I think about the fact that Jews were forced out of basically literally every other place in the totality of the Middle East, that would be an example of an ethnic cleansing. That would be an example.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Israel is functionally an ethno-state, right? So you could argue that it's an ethno-state with an unusually good justification for being an ethno-state. Perhaps you could argue that, but why are people against the one-state solution? Right? They're against it because If you have a democracy where everybody can vote, but the demographics aren't on your side, then you lose power basically, and it's no longer it's considered the end of Israel, because it's no longer a Jewish controlled state. I think that's functionally an ethno state. Higher military service and employment per year. Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, you might be right. I've only. I don't know the kind of intricacies of the demographic information within Jews in Israel. That's interesting.
Yep.
And so when I think about Israel, and I think about a 20% minority Arab population, and I think about a place which currently has an Arab member of its Supreme Court, a place that the very previous majority control over the Knesset, over the parliament, included Arab parties, it's very difficult for me to consider that to genuinely be an ethno-state. I'm uncomfortable with that term.
But, right, I think that's because we're smuggling in all of the bad parts, all of the bad implications.
Right, I think that this might be a difference between the way that the term is used in America versus how it's used in Israel. When people in America hear the term ethno-state, they're hearing it in the context that we're hearing Hitler. They're hearing it in the context that we mean it when we're talking about a place where people who are not of that ethnicity do not have rights. And in Israel proper, which I want to separate out from the West Bank, it is not true that in Israel proper that Palestinians, that Arabs who are non-Jews lack rights in a fundamental sense that is on par.
But a question on that.
I just wanted to say something really quick. I don't even think of it in terms of necessarily Hitler Germany or Nazi Germany.
As I understand it,
could
in
be
Israel
like
proper,
modern Russia right now.
Sorry, can you say that again? I thought you were somebody on the panel at first, and I was like, wait, why is Wick not responding?
When I hear ethno-state, it's not even necessarily like Nazi Germany under Hitler. It could be like modern Russia and how they think of like people abroad, like in Transnistria or in Kaliningrad.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it even just as like, Jim Crow America or something. I mean, yeah. So I feel like there's like a few things that ethno-state could mean, which is either it's like really people who aren't of that group don't really have rights or don't really have the same rights as everyone else, or it can mean that's kind of like who it's for. And I feel like when it comes to Israel, it's for Jews. But it's not like massively different kind of rights for Jews versus non-Jews. So it is kind of different.
Being Jewish does confer special privileges on you that you don't get as a Palestinian. For example, right, like anyone of Israelish descent can become a citizen of Israel in a way that someone who is not.
That's huge.
Sorry, Jewish. My bad. Someone who is not Jewish just can't. Right? Is that not an example of a special privilege being given?
I think it's a little ridiculous to say Israel.
Okay, one time. We're gonna go Quibbles first, we're gonna ask Quibbles, then we'll go Rafi, then we'll go to Go. Go ahead.
Okay, so when I think about the policy of protecting Jews, part of the history of Israel is that it just simply is true that Jews have not been safe consistently anywhere else on earth other than arguably the United States over the past 100 years since the founding of Israel. And so in that context, I want for Israel to be permitted to save Ethiopian Jews. I want it to be a place where Ethiopian Jews can be safe, knowing that they're no longer safe in Ethiopia, knowing that Jews are no longer safe in Egypt or Iraq or Iran or Saudi, go down the list, right? And so that as an immigration policy, I don't think requires that once a person is a citizen of Israel, once a person is part of that society, that they can't have the rights and privileges that are afforded to all citizens in context of a citizen of Israel once they're a citizen. Now, I will flag that there are components, not in terms of immigration, but there are components even once you are a citizen of Israel, which are dissimilar in terms of the way that people who are Arab versus people who are Jewish are able to operate. So the most notable one is the fact that because marriage is controlled religiously, not through government, but through the religious components in Israel, it's very difficult for people to manage to have intermarriage between different religious groups. It's very difficult for people to have certain things that we would understand as rights in the United States. And I think those things are awful.
And it's based on Jewish religion. Like something like marriage being based around one religion, it's at least on its way to meaningfully an ethno-state. But again, yeah, careful not to import everything about what that means. I think it's also somewhat a complaint in America, like recently Hasidic and Haredi Jewish schools in New York were being attacked by the Democratic governor because they alleged that they don't learn English, science, math, etc., like they do religion. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. There's a big thing in, in New York where there's a big Hasidic population, and this question of, if a group wants to be pretty insular, how much do you just kind of let them do that versus having kind of consistent rules when it comes to school. I'm someone who's a pretty big proponent of giving children the opportunity to learn at least a little bit about the world and have an opportunity to choose a different path than their parents. I think that's quite important. And when and how to do that can be very complicated.
But I don't think that they get to the point where I'm comfortable calling it an ethno-state.
Okay. I wanted to hear from Rafi, then go.
Yeah, I think it's really weird that we're fixating in on trying to say that all ethno-states must be bad. I mean, let me ask you, I guess I'll ask the panel if anyone wants to answer, but specifically really the quibbles. If we had a sudden demographic shift, and there was a vast majority of Muslims in Israel, and they enacted a Sharia law, right? Not pejoratively, right? They enacted, like the literal sense of Sharia law, they enacted Islamic law here. They got rid of our fragmented system, right, where each people is governed by their own religious system. Would you still consider that to be Israel? They keep the same name, the same flag, but it's now a country that operates under Sharia law. Right, I think your inability to right. Yeah, exactly. Of course, it's no longer Israel, right? So I think that quibbling over this idea that we're not an ethno state. I'm saying that quibbling over this, when we talk about Israel, right, we're talking about a Jewish state. It must inherently have a Jewish character. It must be there to protect Jews. And quibbling over this, it's not about like we ought to and we do have equal rights. I just don't think that you understand.
That doesn't make us not.
I hate to interrupt, but wouldn't that be under a religious context, not an ethnic one?
Yeah, I mean it's. An ethno-state, but with respect to religion, I guess, is what we're talking about. Maybe the words aren't perfectly capturing, but I think something like that. It's that genre of thing.
I think he's right about some things, though. Like, I don't think all ethno-states act in the same way. I can't say that like Germany and Ukraine act the same way as Russia does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, continue.
Yep.
I'm trying to express that just we are an ethno-state and we protect our Jewish character does not mean that every single citizen can't have equal rights. Right? Especially, for instance, when we talk about Aliyah, the law of return, it actually, for instance, doesn't even technically apply to citizens. I mean, if we're even going to get into the weeds of this, right?
Like how
it applies
the
to
Nazis
non-citizens.
defined,
every country allows
people. That's exactly who.
Every country allows people, or most countries allow, if they operate under jus sanguinis, most countries that have will allow people who are descended of that country to get citizenship even if they weren't born there. So for us, that is Jews. Jews are the ones that are descended from this country.
The term ethno-state, this is just literally from Oxford Dictionary. It's a sovereign state of which citizenship is restricted to members of a particular racial or ethnic group. That does not describe Israel.
Japan. How come Israel's wrong and Japan's okay then? If ethno-states are something immoral.
I would consider it to be.
I think that we're getting into like this semantic.
We're not. No, it's relevant. It's not.
Then what would you? I'm just curious. What would you call? I
would consider Israel to be a Jewish majority state. That is not the same. Like America.
What would happen? What would happen if that majority was threatened?
America is Christian.
No, quibbles. What would happen?
I'm trying to answer, but you keep on interrupting. America is Christian majority. That we are Christian majority is a component of what it means for America to be America, right? It would be a fundamentally.
I disagree fundamentally. America would still be America without Christian majority.
100%.
A fundamentally different country if America.
No, it might alter the.
Wait, no. Wait, what? I think it's a perfect counterexample. I think America would still be America if our demographics shift. It'd be a somewhat different country. Racial joke incoming. Maybe the food would be better. But I think it'd still be America if our racial demographics change. For Israel, it would be not the same country. I think those are opposed examples. With the Amish community. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. It's like, I don't know if it's because I'm Jewish and so I've like interacted with more, Orthodox or not a ton of Hasids, but interacted with more Orthodox people that I feel kind of more comfortable saying like, okay, I feel like even Orthodox kids should have to learn a little bit about the outside world, but I feel less comfortable, saying that about the Amish because I don't know. But okay, but the Amish actually have a thing. It's like broomschaling, or right? There's a word for this where they go out when they're like 16 or 18 or something, and they go walk around the world and learn about it and decide if they want to come back or not. So they actually have this kind of chance for having a very non-insular life built in, whereas the Hasidic community doesn't. So that makes a difference. Yeah.
The character, but it would still be America. America is not based on an ethnic group or religion. Israel is.
I'd like to finish my point. The history of America is built out of the history of Christendom in America. Okay, and so whatever the future of America may be, that is a relevant component of its history. And similarly, the history of Israel and its future must include the protection of Jews, because Jews have been ethnically cleansed out of so many other places. But that does not give Israel the right, nor has Israel attempted to take away citizenship from non-Jewish Israelis.
Okay,
Were they
so
to do
I'll ask
that,
you again.
I
You
would
didn't
oppose
answer
it.
the question. What would we do if suddenly that demographic majority was under threat?
If that demographic majority was under threat, then there would be a reason to have particular immigration laws. But particular immigration laws.
Okay, but there are no quibbles. There are no Jews coming in. We're stuck. Whatever. We have a giant glass dome dropped down over the country. No one can get in and out. Okay. What happens if there
are immigration laws in Israel, right?
I understand the majority. That's fine. But let's you're not engaging with the hypothetical.
Okay. Hey, stop. Both of you, shut up right now. Okay. I'm gonna have to take care of this because
I think this is a good hypothetical, right? So saying it's like, what would we do if, I guess there's a glass dome over the country, nobody can go in or out, but I don't know, Jews aren't having lots of kids and non-Jews are having lots of kids. What would we do if those demographic shifts? And what he's getting at is in Israel, they would do something to make it so that they didn't get outvoted. Don't some nations in Eastern Europe have a borderline ethno-state, at least in proportion of their population, like Poland and Hungary? I mean, in terms of proportion of their population, there's got to be tons of places. About where Israel, as in terms of demographics, replace Jew with Christian. So I think our standards for ethno-state are probably different based on who we're talking about, which you could consider fair or unfair. But for America, the UK, Western Europe anyway, I think we'd probably say that it's not really acceptable, or it's an argument right now that we're having around whether it's acceptable to have laws to prevent some kind of like demographic shift away from white people, and it's considered racist to say that you should have those laws, and I think I agree with that. And Israel, I think, is included within that kind of collective of nations that is held to that standard. Whether it should be or shouldn't be, I don't think this is some kind of like anti-Semitic thing that it's held to this standard. I think it's really, if anything, it's held to the standard of like America, which is that we're or it's held in contrast to that standard, at least, where we are ostensibly a nation of immigrants, and Israel is largely a nation of immigrants, and so it's a little bit different than, there aren't a ton of people who are just crazy about moving to the Balkans, so we kind of just don't have to answer it so much. Here it's super contentious. At least as right wing as Poland and Hungary. Yeah, probably agree.
I think you're missing each other, okay? So I want Rafi to be very clear and concise in the hypothetical, and don't interrupt the hypothetical, and then when Quibbles answers, I need you to shut up too, Rafi, okay? So I need these both things to happen, okay? Rafi first, and then Quibbles.
Yeah, with moderation.
So I understand the reluctance to get into these kinds of terms in the same way that Zionist has been tarnished, ethno-state has been tarnished. I think that, look, so we have to understand, right? If Israel's meant to protect Jews, as you said, and if we were in a situation where there is no possible way to bring in more people or increase Jewish reproduction rate, okay? But within 6 months, there will be a significant majority Muslim population in Israel. Do you think that would continue to be Israel, or would the Israeli government necessarily need to do something about that, involving like removing people's citizenships?
Okay. So my answer is that if you are asking whether or not people should be stripped of their citizenship because
No, that's not what I'm asking. I don't interrupt, but that's not what I'm asking.
You literally did just ask that, whether or not we should strip people.
He's asking, would that happen? Not should. He's asking, like, what is the character of Israel? Is it a nation that would do that or one that wouldn't do that? And I would say it probably would, but at least that's what he's getting at.
People's citizenship. That's explicitly what you just said. Okay. If you're asking whether or not Israel should strip citizenship of non-Jews, the answer is, of course, no. Stripping citizenship is a fundamentally different act than restricting immigration. When you're asking about restricting immigration, that's perfectly legitimate. The definition of an ethno-state is a sovereign state of which citizenship is restricted. Citizenship is restricted. Not immigration, but citizenship is restricted to members.
Well, wait. If you only allow Jews to immigrate into Israel, that's not an ethno-state, but it is if you strip citizenship. I feel like that's a pretty restrictive. Like, where was he getting this definition from? Ethno-state. What is that? Was it Merriam-Webster? A country populated by or dominated by the interests of a single racial or ethnic group. This is dictionary.com. Where's Merriam-Webster from ethnos? It doesn't even have a definition. Okay, well, I don't know. Google says sovereign state of which citizenship is restricted to members of a particular racial or ethnic group. Dictionary.com says a group populated by or dominated by the interests of a single racial or ethnic group. That feels closer to the kind of like working definition that I feel like we probably use much more often. Is that it's like it's about the interests of a particular group or dominated by a particular group more than like this hyper specific, like only they can get, they're allowed citizenship. But if you restrict immigration, isn't that kind of the same thing?
Members of a particular racial or ethnic group. If you are describing that, that is
like
one.
It's like hyper fixated on this one particular definition that has this really restrictive meaning that I feel like is not generally what we're talking about when we talk about ethno-state.
Horrible. And two, not representative of Israel now or Israel any time in its past. It is not true. If you're asking whether or not,
I'm asking, would Israel be able to continue existing in that
situation? I didn't interrupt you. I'm trying to finish. If you're asking whether or not in a future that it could be potentially defensible for a Jewish ethno-state to take place in the place that is currently Israel, which would be fundamentally dissimilar from what Israel is currently, no, I would not support that ethno-state. I would absolutely support, as is currently the case, immigration laws, and I would absolutely support a active attempt to recruit, to pull in more Jews from outside of the territory that is currently Israel in order to maintain that ethnic majority, Jewish majority. But that's different than forcibly removing citizenship, which I think is fundamentally evil and fundamentally different.
Again, I guess it's very nice, it's very morally big, but that's not the question I'm asking. I'm not asking you to support morally. Of course, it would be horrific to remove people's citizenship. I'm pointing out that the entire conception of Israel, if suddenly there was a huge demographic shift, we wouldn't call that country Israel. We would not say that there was a Jewish state anymore. So it seems to me just to be like very, I don't want to say weaselly, but why fight on this? Like, why? It is a Jewish state, right? We call it the Jewish state. We had a nation-state law passed here.
No.
Well, let
we had a nation.
Now.
Yeah, we had a nation. It's okay. He can interrupt. We're Jews. We talk over
You
each
didn't
other.
say. You didn't ask
Oh,
whether or not
that's
it's a Jewish state. You didn't ask whether or not it's a Jewish state. If you asked whether it's a Jewish state, I would say yes. That's a very different question than whether or not it's an ethno-state. Ethno-state and Jewish state are not the same thing.
Okay, $5 for Zephyr Hash to say ethno-state is so October 2023. The latest November 2023 lingo is apartheid state. And I do want to ask you all if you think Israel is an apartheid state. I want to start with Dakios.
No, of course not.
Okay, so Dakios says of course not. What do you think? Let's just go around real quick. Just a lightning round here.
Very easily, no. We have Arabs in our parliaments. Like, no, we're not.
Okay, not an apartheid state. Saxion, apartheid state?
I think it's a reasonable conversation to have. I wouldn't say explicitly yes, though.
Dodging, weaseling the question. Okay, Mono, what do you think?
It's definitely partially.
Partially apartheid. Okay, Jason.
No.
No. Go.
Nope.
No. Quibbles.
If you believe in a one-state solution,
Yes or no?
I want to give the answer. It's in Israel proper.
Okay, Weasley not answer. Okay, Silver.
I don't know anything about Jews. If you think you can answer questions,
Okay, if you're asking in terms of Israel proper, the answer is flatly no. It is not an ethno-state. If you're asking in
Apartheid.
terms of the West
Apartheid,
Bank,
not ethno.
if you believe, sorry, it's not apartheid. If you're asking in terms of the West Bank, if you believe in a one-state solution, then it is arguably apartheid in the West Bank. If you believe in a one-state solution, however, believing in a one-state solution is fucking stupid. No one should believe in a one-state solution, and therefore, because it should be understood as being on a trajectory towards being an independent country, it is not apartheid. It is instead an occupation that is, I think, defensible given the circumstance, but obviously regrettable.
Okay.
It took about an hour and 15 minutes to activate the quibbles.
Yeah. Go ahead, Silver. What's your answer? Apartheid state? Yes or no?
No.
No.
Two letters. No.
Rafi, you had a really strong reaction to that. I want to hear your reaction. Go ahead. Now you can elaborate.
I have all these issues with the way that we smuggle in all these connotations to terms, and we use certain words that really have no application. All these words kind of
people
start
don't know what
to
they
become
actually
meaningless
mean.
when we talk. They start to become meaningless when we talk about Israel. So I guess we can distinguish. We have Israel proper. Is it an apartheid state? I guess if your IQ is in the single digits, maybe you could say that. We have Arabs in our parliament. We have equal rights for everyone here. Obviously, we have economic differences between specific groups. We have issues. There's always going to be racism in any country. There are things we can work on and improve. That's not apartheid. That's normal civil society. In the territories that are disputed, I think that we can make a case that obviously people don't have the same rights there, especially because of the settlement projects where we have Israeli citizens and non-Israeli citizens living in the same area. But again, military occupation is not apartheid, and we can address the necessity of the military occupation as a separate question. But to call it apartheid is just stupid, and it's very clear that what we're doing is trying to maliciously smuggle in all the connotations of apartheid and oppression that people face under those systems into the conversation. And that's actually why, to go back to the ethno-state very quickly, I think that's what happens. That people, when they hear ethno-state, they hear apartheid. I think that it's possible to have an ethno-state without apartheid, and it's possible to have apartheid without an ethno-state. But these concepts need to be separated.
As soon as you hear apartheid, you already think the worst.
Well,
That's what it was designed. That was what the talking about was designed to do.
So Staxium's and I think Mono, I believe, were like, yes, it kind of is, and I want to hear your arguments for this.
I think for me, the settlements are the
if the citizen
part, because it's not necessarily a military occupation. You have citizens there, or just civilians, not even citizens. Whichever way you want to address them. Just
right, but can we acknowledge that's a separate discussion then? That saying that when someone says Israel is an apartheid state, right? The very clear intent there is that Israel is doing something horrific, and we need to dismantle that system.
But
saying that the West Bank,
that's what
yeah,
I mean.
right.
I don't know what people.
When people say Israel is an apartheid state, it's very clear.
Give me just a
well,
moment.
thank God
When people in general talk about it, they might mean something. But we're in a panel. In this panel, I think people know specifically exactly what I meant.
I don't actually. When someone says they think that Israel is an apartheid state, I assume they're talking about Israel.
No, I said partially, and then I said it's the settlements which are the part that I mean is
right. No,
that's
right. But then I'm saying why even use the word? Why even use the word when I should discuss the justification of the occupation? Because that's really what you have a problem with. You don't have a right. For you, the problem is that there's an occupation. If the occupation ended, no problem, right?
I guess what I'm trying to say is you feel really comfortable with the word occupation, but I think when it comes to occupation of civilians and citizens of Israel, like that, like Palestinians, I think that conversation of apartheid is at least a little bit warranted. So when you ask me that question, I'll say yeah, kind of, but I don't want to give a full-fledged yes because I don't want to just say Israel is an apartheid state in that very broad definition that I think we all agree is probably not accurate. You know what I'm saying?
I guess would we call every colonial or imperial state an apartheid state in that case?
Could you repeat that?
Was England, the UK, were they an apartheid state until they ended all the colonies? Yeah, I don't understand. Like,
how are we defining apartheid? Can we just get a quick?
Were they an apartheid state when they were colonizing other countries? I mean, that's interesting. If you want to call them like a colonial state instead of an apartheid state, I mean, they're denying that they're colonizing Gaza and the West Bank, but that's interesting. Would you call the UK an apartheid state when it's colonizing India? I don't think. No. On the other hand, the way that citizens are interacting with Israel, it's a pretty close tie, and they're adjacent, versus the UK and America or India are not interacting in the same way, and we have like a good word for it, which is colonialism. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, can someone pull the definition?
Sure.
Exactly.
Specifically someone who believes that it's
well, I can just really quick. A policy or system of segregation or discrimination on grounds of race.
Okay, is that something that the people who
or segregation on other grounds other than race? So you have a gender apartheid.
So Staxium, are you comfortable with that as a definition?
I think that segregation. I think that's a fair conversation. Sorry,
the very clear. It's not. I guess.
Wait, let me finish my question. Let me finish.
Right?
I
can't hear either of you guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No one's. Everyone's talking over each other, right? And I know, like, you say it's a Jewish thing, but on this panel, right, we're gonna do the Whick thing.
No,
we colonize the panel.
Oh, God. Am I settled? Wait, am I being apartheided right now? Is this what's happening? Am I being a second class citizen?
If you get
actually no, that joke's gonna be too dark. Never mind.
Oh, now you started it. Yeah. Well, no, if it's taught, don't do it. But.
No, it's not too.
So again, I'll read it again. Policy or system of segregation or discrimination on grounds of race. A segregation on grounds other than race can also be considered apartheid, at least by the dictionary.
So when you're talking about that segregation, are you saying that in terms of the West Bank, or are you saying that in terms of Israel proper? And if you're talking about Israel proper,
no, the settlements.
Exclusively in Israel.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And so when you're talking about the West Bank component, what is it that you have an issue with? Are you concerned with Area C, the military control? Are you concerned about the inclusion of a growing number of Jews living in settlements?
I'll be honest. I don't feel that well equipped to answer that question. Maybe that's just I'm not specifically familiar enough.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question.
Here's the way I think about it, right? Because like, okay, Area A is entirely controlled by the Palestinian Authority, both militarily and civilly. Area B is simply civilly controlled by the Palestinian Authority, but is not militarily controlled. And Area C is both civilly and militarily controlled by the IDF, by the Israel. Now, the first thing that I'll flag is that the majority of territory is Area C, but the majority of the population is Area A. Or the majority of the cities, the places that people actually live, is under the control of the Palestinian Authority. So that's the first component that I think is worth noting when we're trying to flag this, right? But the second component that I think is worth thinking about is that, okay, so is it segregation, or is it a different country? Because if you're thinking of it as on trajectory towards being a different country, yeah, go for it.
Well, no, that's a fair question, but definitionally, right now, it is not its own country, right? Like, Palestine is not a universally recognized country. So if it
But
were,
not a universally recognized country either. Nearly half the world doesn't recognize the country.
Wait, recognize what? Israel?
Israel, yeah, nearly half the world.
Rafi made a statement. You're saying, Rafi, and I heard, this is what I heard, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Quite a lot of the world does not. I mean, if we're going to go by, there are many states that actually do recognize the Palestinians as their own states. By the way, the Palestinians are the ones who say they aren't a state. Many people do recognize them, but many people also don't recognize us as a state. So I think getting into these discussions of who is in a state, I mean, it's a little bit, it's pointless. It's besides the point.
The point that I'm trying to parse here is that it doesn't make sense to simultaneously say that it's segregation and also say that it's an occupation. Only one of those things can be true, right? It can't
I agree.
Be both.
I generally lean towards segregation. I think segregation makes a little bit more sense because Palestine, I wouldn't consider it its own country because I generally defer to the UN.
Okay, so then in that case, yeah, first of all, I think that's a mistake because I think that much.
I would say the UN is probably one of the least reliable. I would say maybe like God's Health Ministry is at the bottom, and then
I
UN
think I
is
would
like centimeters above them.
disagree there.
When it comes
Like,
to
I don't
reliable,
see why it
think
couldn't be segregated and occupied.
Could be segregated and.
What do you think?
Yeah, this is where I don't know. These definitions get a little complicated. I think it's in this kind of. I think it demonstrates that confusion demonstrates that it's in this kind of gray zone between being a single apartheid state and a state that's occupying another state, because it's a state that has some aspirations towards statehood, but at the same time, the Palestinian Authority is like very tightly bound up. Is like its taxes are collected via Israel, I think. Is that accurate? I just looked this up. But it's like it's tightly tied to Israel as like a functioning society as its basic infrastructure. So I think it is kind of both. Yeah. But it's
from my understanding, and I don't know all the details, but from my understanding, Israel has different roads, right? Like one for Muslims and Arabs, and one for like normal Israelis.
Wait, within Israel?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's the case. No, there's no like separate roads.
So what's the distinction between Israel proper and like the rest of Israel? Because we could point to West Bank settlements, East Jerusalem evictions, and arguably what could be an annexation or a mowing of the lawn, if you will, in the Gaza Strip. So are we just talking about isolating all three of those things and saying the rest of Israel is just equal?
No, so people who are in the West Bank have very different rights than people in Israel. When it comes to like checkpoints, when it comes to there's like so when you're talking about like within the area near the settlements, there's probably different roads because there's like
but that wouldn't be Israel proper.
Yeah, that's not Israel proper. I don't believe within Israel proper there's like different roads for like Jews and non-Jews. I don't think anything like that is there. I'd be very surprised. But in terms of like the settlements, in terms of West Bank compared to Israel, the kind of freedom of movement is very different. So that's a big thing.
All right, keep going.
If we're trying to think about
the UN pretty much parrots whatever they're told by Fatah and Hamas, right? Any independent verification is just totally reliant on Fatah and Hamas. So the UN is functionally a propaganda arm.
Wait, oh God, the UN is a propaganda arm of Fatah and Hamas?
points.
Not to mention the plurality. The plurality
trying
of
to think
countries
about
represented
how
there.
if we're trying to think about how we can get to a point where we're able to see
Okay.
an Israel and a Palestine at peace, I think it has to come from a starting point of recognizing the fact that, as Rafi was saying, that Israel has to be a Jewish majority, and still nonetheless a democracy, still nonetheless a parliamentary system which has the inclusion of Palestinians who are the minority there as genuine members of the society, but that it has to be a Jewish majority. And similarly, that Palestine, if it's going to be free, also has to be a Palestinian majority, perhaps with a Jewish minority, but again, Palestinian majority.
Well, let's tackle that for a minute, if I may. Just another lightning round here, right? And
well, if I can just finish the point.
Finish your point, but then I have another lightning round, so please.
So that starting point, I think. So that starting point, I think, has to be the starting point for those of us who genuinely do believe in my case, a three-state, because I don't think the West Bank and Gaza should be one country, but either a 3 or 2-state solution compared to the one-state solution. And if that's the thing that we believe, then talking about it as apartheid, talking about it as segregation, I think just fundamentally fails to understand the situation as what it is, which is an occupation. And we can talk about why it's being occupied and the problems that result from it being occupied, and also the reasons why that occupation may be necessary, not just in the West Bank, but I think increasingly in Gaza. But that's a different question than whether or not it's one country, whether or not it's segregation. Sorry.
You know what? I'll concede my point, and I'll say
before you go too far, I gotta jump in here because this is interesting and I want to talk about it. And I think we deserve to have this conversation. There's going to be 2 questions I'm going to ask. One is a lightning round. We're going to go around again, quick as you can. Quibbles, I'm looking at you, right? And then the second question. Well, you're still talking and not letting me answer the question. So, ask the question. So the second question is going to be the general question that I want the actual discussion on. Okay. So I guess the first question is: do we believe that Palestine, right, should exist as a state, right, alongside of Israel? Just real quick. Palestine exists as a state alongside Israel. Go. What do you think?
Wait, you're going to be so
Most definitely, yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Jason.
Oh, sorry, I can't tell who you're pointing to.
Oh yeah, you're just pointing. I didn't know.
I guess.
You're pointing between quibbles.
Okay, yes or no, Palestine? Yes. Mono.
yes.
Daxiums.
Yes.
Silver.
Sure.
Quibbles.
You're going to be so proud of me. One word, yes.
You made like 7 words to say 1 word, okay? And then Rafi, do you think Palestine?
Let's go.
Absolutely yes.
Absolutely yes. Then the discussion question here is: what is the biggest obstacle right now to Palestine becoming a state?
Hamas. Radicalization.
I
would say Hamas.
Lightning round. Do another lightning round.
Hamas is absolutely a cop-out. It's the fundamental radicalization of the population on both sides, but especially among Palestinian society. It's because having been in the military, we're not just fighting Hamas. We're fighting dozens of these groups. They pop up like every other day. If we crush Hamas, there's just going to be another one. And it's very sad to say, but the occupation that exists right now is probably the worst possible thing that could have ever happened, because it would have been better to either have no occupation or to have a deep occupation. But Oslo, I think, was one of the biggest mistakes that has happened in the history of our conflicts, in that it brought in a government that had no intention of ever reaching peace to educate and take control of their own people and just completely radicalize them over generations. And
do you feel that the Palestinians are radicalized beyond like?
No, there's no such thing as beyond. But we're talking about. I full-throatedly support a Palestinian state. I believe that every single group of people has a right to self-determination if they desire it and if they express like a need for it. But I think that the Palestinian state, just if we're talking practicalities, it will not exist for at least 2 generations now because of what's happened.
Not as long as we still fear for another.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the kinds of things that are taught in schools in the Palestinian territories.
Oh, we see the videos and Farfor and all that.
Yeah, they frequently have like math problems that include like how many Jews did the Shahid kill if his vest went off and there were 10 Jews in the room, but 2 of them walked out first. Right? I mean, like it sounds like a joke, but it's like these are actually in their textbooks. And I think that fundamentally, deep,
it's
very
in
sad
their
to say
education.
this. I want to be very.
They have like shows for children that have this propaganda, and that's like that's like
I want to be
insane.
very nuanced when I say this, but what's necessary is fundamentally a deep occupation. It doesn't necessarily have to be by Israel, but there must be a total.
I know a lot of people
want education system.
Yeah, I know a lot of people want to talk on this, but I have to interrogate that a little bit because what do you mean by a deep occupation?
So when I say a deep occupation, right now what we have is a military occupation. We have security forces that control security, that do what our government feels is necessary to enforce a secure status quo, right, where Jews are not being killed, etc. Okay, and that's an occupation. I think that's horrible because it doesn't really change anything. People are continuing to be radicalized. Each round of violence further radicalizes people. So the occupation right now accomplishes nothing other than preventing most of the attacks. But I'm saying in terms of all it does, the occupation now is preserve the status quo, and I think that's horrific. When we talk about it, when I say a deep occupation, I mean an occupation that penetrates into the civil layers of society. It's not purely a security-based occupation. So it's an occupation, perhaps of other Arab states or some kind of joint effort between many different states. But
he didn't say it has to be Israel. He said
I very specifically said it doesn't need to be Israel. But there needs to be a fundamental dismantling of the system of education that currently exists in the Palestinian territory.
Even the Palestinian Authority. Stop, please. Let me interrogate this because I'm very curious. The Palestinian Authority would also be dismantled in this deep occupation.
Absolutely. We need to radically invest in the future of Palestinians. We need to give them options. We need to make sure that they have choices in their lives. We need to make sure that they have the potential to grow financially, to improve their lives. And one of the first steps of that is that children can't be taught that every bad thing that happens in their life is because of a Jew across the border. As long as they.
Well, oh Jesus. So, I was really with him for the first half of that. Oh, hey Link, welcome. Okay, yeah, I 100% agree. There has to be a huge investment for Palestinians. This it feels like what he's saying is the same as what conservatives are saying in America. Like, oh yeah, we need to invest a lot to help Black Americans. We need to make sure that the educational system isn't teaching them that like everything is white people's fault, but in this case for Israelis. I I don't think that's like the main thing that needs to happen. Maybe he's gonna go on to say more. Do you not think there's an issue where people will set objectively anti-Semitic standards and then say anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism? Can you give an example of that? I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
UN ain't gonna do it, so like, whose job is that?
I want Goats to go. So Goats, you asked a question, and I think it deserves an answer. The UN isn't going to do that. So who is?
So whose job is that? Like, who's going to do that?
It's very sad, but it's ours because no one else is going to help us. We have to do this. We have to invest our own financial or capital or effort into making sure that there's a future where our children are not going to be killed.
You know that's what but you do know that what that will be painted as, right? You understand.
Absolutely, I understand. I understand, but that's what I'm saying. That we're in a situation. You know, there's a sanitization of war and of conflict in the West. For most of the West, since after World War II, conflict is something that happens very far away from you. It's not something that poses an existential threat. Both peoples right now, both Palestinians, feel an existential threat. Okay, I don't want to get into arguments over who's more justified, over because we can go like a million years talking about who ought to be the bigger victim in the situation, and it doesn't even matter. The point is that right now Israel has the power. We have the upper hand militarily, and we need to make sure that we're doing what is necessary to ensure that both Palestinians and Jews can have a future. Because I see this conflict going one of two ways. Either we do what's necessary to bring peace and to de-radicalize the Palestinian population, which, by the way, because there are probably people, I'm not really following the chat, but people that are talking, they're not that radicalized. Polling as of like a few days ago is that 70% of the Palestinian population supports armed resistance against Israel. Okay, so it's like that's just not a viable place where we can have two states side by side. If 70% of Canadians wanted to go and kill Americans, like the situation would not continue in the way that it is. So,
well, wait, that's not it's not a fair comparison. It would be something like if 70% of like indigenous Americans on reservations thought that armed resistance, but it's still not just even comparable. It's more like indigenous populations, armed resistance, or if you looked at, I mean, here's the thing. When you look at South Africa during apartheid, what percent of Black South Africans supported Nelson Mandela using violent actions for resistance against the state? I don't know what that number is, but it's probably quite high. And from there, despite that, they were able to integrate. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily like the first thing that has to be changed. I do think Israel has a lot more options in terms of kind of gestures it can make toward goodwill. I don't know exactly what. Look, Hamas is not going to be making any gestures toward peace. They're anti-peace, right? They're not trying to make that happen. So it's a question of what kind of reasonable people on both sides can do. I feel like there's more options for what reasonable Israelis can do. Let me look at the questions in chat. Recently, I was in this communist Twitch streamer's chat. He said everyone who doesn't actively attack Israel is a Zionist. All Zionists are Nazis, and it's okay to do violence against Nazis. So they were defending the Hamas bombing Israelis. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously ridiculous. And I assume he was saying, when you say everyone who doesn't actively attack Israel is a Zionist, I assume, first of all, by attackers Israel, you mean like critique. You don't have to like join Hamas or something. I assume he wasn't saying that, but he was probably saying everybody who's Jewish who doesn't attack Israel is a Zionist, which is, I think that's probably an anti-Semitic thing to say, and that's just absurd. There's lots of people who are Jewish who don't support Israel, don't really think about it. They're not Zionists. Like it doesn't mean anything to say that. That's like a non-content statement. What do you mean they're Zionists? Zionist at least means supporting the creation or existence of the state of Israel or something. Somebody who doesn't care about that, doesn't think about that, whether or not they're Jewish, it doesn't mean anything to say that they're Zionists. All Zionists are Nazis. That's absurd also. I mean, there's this video where Noam Chomsky's talking about, he was like, back in my day, in the God, how old is he? I don't know, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. He was a Zionist because he supported creating a state of Israel, but he was against some kind of like segregationist or apartheid or whatever, something that would displace Palestinians, and that was still considered Zionist. That was obviously not Nazi, so that's also wrong. And it's okay to do violence against Nazis. No, I mean, if somebody's like a neo-Nazi somewhere on the street in America, you can't just attack them. So I think all three pieces of that are wrong. Basically, under that standard, almost every Jew that doesn't actively want to dismantle Israel is a Nazi. Yeah, I mean that's a deranged viewpoint. Opposing the Hamas attack against Israel is saying there's good Nazis. I mean, look, during World War II, there's some household, there's some group of people who, who joined the party at the last possible moment because they were terrified for their lives, and they do whatever like minimal things they need to do to support the war effort. And it's like, some family somewhere. I don't think we should just randomly murder that family. Like a literal World War II Nazis, you shouldn't necessarily just go around murdering them willy-nilly. Just people who are in Germany who are technically like part of the party. Even to that extreme, I don't think it's good to just murder people. This may come as a surprise for people who are new watchers, but I'm generally against violence, against heretic people. So may come as a shock. We'll see.
We unfortunately are in a situation where either we do what's
Whoa,
necessary
whoa,
even if it's not
two
pretty,
TOS,
to
man.
achieve a future where
Yeah. TOS. It's kind of a radical position. I'll probably get canceled for it. Those Israelis simply being Israeli were Zionists and therefore Nazis. I mean, how to argue against him? I mean, if you want, feel free to connect us, and I'll argue against him. But if he's gonna be like, what's that guy's name? Infrared, who's just like yelling and screaming and stuff. I'm not really interested in that, but I'll argue that. I'd be willing to have that conversation, but I think just every part of what he said is just wrong. Defends Joseph Stalin. His name is the Canadian commie. I mean, that's not a commie. That's a tanky, right? So I would say that I'm a communist, or I would consider myself a communist in the sense that I think it's worth believing in and fighting for a world in which everybody is included within society. It's difficult. Maybe it's impossible. Maybe it'll never happen. It's by definition utopian. But I think that's a good thing to strive for. In the same way that like Christianity, if you think Christianity is like we should have love for all mankind or all thinking beings or whatever, then I'm for that. Yeah, I mean 20th century communism, is generally not been so successful. Yeah, I mean this is getting into something semantic.
Jews and Palestinians live side by side in peace, or one of these two peoples get genocided. I mean, I don't see another way where this conflict ends.
I think the first thing that we need to recognize is that the status quo is not acceptable.
That's just procrastination, the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the status quo is unacceptable, and that needs to be just like the first statement that you make before you make whatever next statement you're going to make. The status quo is unacceptable, and that is true in the West Bank, and it's particularly true in Gaza, as we saw on the 7th, and as we saw, frankly, on the 6th, as we saw prior to the 7th, right? Because when we think about right now there's a lot of people who are talking on the purportedly pro-Palestine side of things in the West about how horrible Israel's response has been to the Palestinians living in Gaza, and what they're not recognizing is that the reason that the numbers are so high in terms of the number of Gazans who have been killed is because explicitly, as a decision of war, Hamas is intentionally hiding all of their stuff and hiding themselves behind civilians and specifically behind children.
I'm pretty sure they also keep civilians like.
You don't even have to say it so indirectly. It's a policy.
That is a policy. Yeah, that's a policy of theirs.
A martyrdom.
So And so and it's not even just a policy that they're doing in terms of a way of protecting themselves, but also it's a policy they're doing as a way of wielding their influence and wielding those deaths to have the exact response that people who aren't particularly invested or focused on this conflict are giving, which is the response of, oh my God, the IDF just killed a bunch of people, as though that wasn't the explicit point of what.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with this. I think that is absolutely a huge aim of Hamas. I would say, I don't know how far he's going to go with this. I wouldn't say that therefore justifies bombing of civilian areas by the IDF. You know, if somebody's holding up, in the most kind of straightforward human shield example, somebody's holding up a child as a human shield, you don't necessarily, or holding a has a whole family hostage around them as human shields. You don't necessarily have to blow up that building right then and there. You know, just because they're using human shields in this way doesn't mean that that you have no choice but to simply bomb them exactly like that. You still have to justify those individual bombings.
Hamas was doing, as though that wasn't explicitly what they were trying to have happen, right? And so the first part that we need to get to, if we're going to get to a place of peace, is that the West needs to grow the fuck up. The West needs to understand what exactly Hamas is doing and how exactly they are a part of that process of the terrorists and how they are at fault and they are being useful to those terrorists, right? So that's the first part.
Wait, hold on. I want to push back on this. So what is happening here, right? To the normie, the person who isn't invested, who isn't involved, who doesn't know. They see pictures, and they are horrific, and it is a tragedy.
It is
children,
absolutely.
5,000, I think, at this point, having been killed by Israeli bombs.
Yep.
And
if I can ask, sorry, I didn't interrupt. Please don't quote any specific numbers because they're all unverified. They're all.
I'm just speaking as a normie. This is the numbers they're hearing.
Well, okay. Yeah. I don't know. I don't like this. I'll say among anything else, you know, if you're worried about anti-Semitism, don't be defensive about other people's suffering. It's a really bad look.
Okay, so the normie, they're hearing this, they're seeing photos of this, right? And I'm not an expert, I'm not going to qualify any of these numbers, but let's, for the purpose of this conversation, please. So again, they see this happening. They have an empathetic response. I don't want to see kids dying. No one wants to see a child die, right? And an Israeli bomb comes and kills them, and the numbers are pretty staggering, and you think, wow,
they're playing into the hands of the
you think that's a
the blame is misplaced. I mean,
okay, this is a basic principle.
I mean, playing into the hands of the terrorists. You can't. If you say the IDF is playing into the hands, or I guess they're saying people abroad are playing, but that's not what that phrase means. Wait, let me just rewind that a moment. Sorry, I just want to hear exactly what he said.
No one wants to see a child die, right? And an Israeli bomb comes and kills them, and the numbers are pretty staggering, and you think, wow,
they're playing into the hands of the
you think that's a
the blame is misplaced. I mean,
who's playing into the hands? The IDF or the people abroad?
Okay. This is a basic principle of the warfare that Hamas is engaging in. As a tactic of war, they know that, and this part is completely accurate, that if they went head to head directly against the IDF, that Hamas would lose. Hamas knows that, the IDF knows that, everyone knows that. It's just true, right? And so therefore, they are deciding as a tactic of war to be engaged in this type of warfare where instead of going one-to-one, they are wielding these things that are not conventional weapons, that are instead, that they're using as shields, humans, children, right, specifically, Palestinian children, and that specifically, they are trying to wield that for propagandistic purposes. And so the reason that they're doing this, and when we play into that as the West, when we as the West are constantly focusing on those numbers, are constantly focusing on the number of captives that...
Whoa, okay, watch out here. Let's see what he's gonna say.
They're holding currently underground.
Oh, this guy. Yeah, this is the guy. Okay.
Forcing grandmothers to walk miles and miles and miles underground in tunnels, right? That is explicitly playing in...
Wait, I want to look up this anecdote. Let me know if anybody has. Hamas grandmother tunnel, are talking about the people who were 85-year-old grandma as a hostage. Oh, okay. She was a hostage though. Yeah. Okay. But that's not their own people though. Okay.
into the hands of the terrorists. That is explicitly why they are doing it, so that we have the exact response that we have, and so that it becomes more and more difficult for the IDF to do the thing that is required if we're going to move forward. The reality is that the only way that we get to a 2 or 3 state solution, the only way that we get to an actual lasting piece of justice, is if we kill everyone who's a part of Hamas, is if we manage to take them out. And so
again, to
they're
push back on
doing
that,
this.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, this is... So what would he say if you were to ask him? And I've seen this guy at a bunch of panels, so I could probably hit him up, and that might be good actually for us to have a one-on-one panel, because I think we have a lot of contention, but he seems like he's like a pretty respectful person. But it's like, okay, well, what if we had to kill a quarter of the population of Gaza to kill everybody in Hamas? Would that be an acceptable odds? Maybe there's even an argument that maybe that's like the only way to lasting peace. I don't think that's a very good argument. If you kill, if everybody in Gaza has lots more people who were killed by the IDF, I don't think that's gonna necessarily lead to peace. I mean, are we going to bring up the fact that there are people in Israel, people who are Israelis, who do think that we should wipe out everybody in Gaza, who clearly do want to genocide the Palestinians? I'm not saying that this is all Israelis. I'm not saying this is the IDF. I'm not saying this is Israel. But there are people within Israel who do have this perspective. Who is Netanyahu's minister, who he like put him on leave or made him step down or something because he talked about nuking Gaza. I mean, this was in his like cabinet. So, and I don't think this is. I don't know what the numbers are. I mean, I don't know. Poll Israelis. We should wipe out. I mean, they're calling human animals. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, we can look at some polling.
I think there was some like Israeli ministers that literally called Palestinians Nazis.
I mean, I'm sure there were. They called either Palestinians or Hamas, not very clear, like human animals, which is dehumanizing and can be a step toward genocide when you're bombing people. And then there was the minister who talked about nuking Gaza, and Netanyahu made him step down or take a leave or something, take a lap. But that was somebody in his cabinet talking about nuking Gaza. So this idea that there's it's playing into the hands of what Hamas wants, but it also seems to be playing into the hands of probably what Netanyahu wants. I mean, are there people who doubt that Netanyahu would probably like to wipe out not just Hamas, but probably most of Gaza? Is that controversial? I don't know.
To push back on that, right? Other people would say no. The fact that Hamas is wielding these weapons is why we need a ceasefire, right? There's millions.
Yeah, they're fucking stupid.
Let me finish. Stop. Let me finish, and then we'll get to it, right? And you can call them whatever you like, and you can counter the point. But they are calling for a ceasefire now because the lives of those people being killed now, right? Regardless of why, regardless of whose fault it is, these are people, right, who would be alive if Israel just stopped, right? They would not be dead if Israel stopped the bombs, if Israel stopped going after Hamas, if they sat down, negotiated a peace, etc. So what do you say to that? Because that's a very powerful argument that is winning. Because Rafi said at the very beginning of this conversation, right, that even more important than what happens when the bullets fly on the ground, right, is perhaps, arguably, the words and the ways we talk about it, right? And I don't think, unless any of you want to disagree with me, want to take the position that IDF is winning that war, because they're not. They're absolutely getting bodied in that war.
If you want a ceasefire, if Hamas genuinely was interested in a ceasefire, here's what they would do. One, they would not have a bunch of innocent civilians held in underground tunnels, right? They would hand back all the hostages. That's the first thing that they would do. The second thing that they would do, if they actually...
no. Oh, God. Wait, it's this guy?
Actually believed in...
Yeah, it's this guy talking in. Okay. I think I probably should talk to him. Does anyone know his name? I don't know how productive it could be, but I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, Vivian actually wanted to talk to him and debate him. His name is Quibbles.
Oh, that's Quibbles. Okay. Yeah, let me just send something to Wick. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Can make that happen. Yeah. I mean, okay. Look, there's two ways to think about it. You give up the hostages, and then people are like, "Oh wow, okay, now you got to do a ceasefire. They're doing something. You've got to do something." The other hand, you say, "Well, look, we have the hostages. Maybe they won't bomb us as much. Maybe like you have leverage. You have something they want. Maybe we can leverage them for a ceasefire." So. I'm not a military strategist or a hostage negotiator or any of this, but I don't think it's just obvious that's how that works. I heard China wants to nuke Taiwan to repopulate, so they don't think Taiwanese would be conquerable, so it's replacement theory now. Jesus, well that's not good. It's worrying Asia a lot these days. Yeah, Jesus.
That they wanted to have a two-state solution. They actually wanted to have freedom for both Palestinians and also Israelis. They would stop shooting rockets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with him that I don't think Hamas wants peace or wants a two-state solution, right? I don't know how much this is speculation versus like considered kind of like mainstream expert opinion, but the talks between was it Israel and Saudi Arabia, right? To get Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel and then get more like concessions for Palestinians, that it would probably marginalize Hamas or maybe spell the end of Hamas. That was potentially why they did this attack, although it was in the works for a while. I don't know. But yeah, it seems pretty clear that Hamas is opposed to peace. I don't think that's, but the question is how much it seems like Quibbles is taking here kind of Hamas as a proxy for like all Palestinians. It's a little bit unclear exactly what he's saying with what he's saying. Like, okay, we can't really do anything with kind of back and forth with Palestinians while Hamas is there kind of messing things up. So we really need to get rid of Hamas. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But how much he's using like Hamas as an indicator of where Palestinians generally are at, I don't think that's fair.
At innocent civilians in Tel Aviv and across Israel as a whole. Okay, that's the second thing they do. The third thing that they would do is that they would have elections. They haven't had elections since literally the early 2000s, right? Literally, it has been 17 fucking years since they had an election, right? So if they actually wanted to get there, they could do those things. They could do the kinds of things. They would, for example, stop pulling up literal pipes, water pipes that are trying. Like people are constantly talking about the water crisis of Gaza, and rightly so, because the water crisis in Gaza is horrible. But it is the explicit and a direct responsibility of Gaza, who is pulling up water pipes as Israel is, despite living in a desert, despite themselves having water security issues, going out of their way.
Using the humanitarian aid that
they're going
getting.
out of their way. They're going out of their way to rip up water pipes in order to use those water pipes literally as rockets to shoot at children in Tel Aviv. And while they do it, they're hiding behind Palestine.
So I feel like I hear this a lot. And I don't know what proportion of this talking point is like total is like one anecdote that's kind of being used as a broad brush, or how prevalent this is. I looked up when it came to aid being diverted, and Germany saw that their developmental aid had not been diverted, and Qatar, I think, said that their aid wasn't diverted, but I don't know how much. I don't know how to judge, how valid that is. But this thing with like water pipes, like, is this did Hamas skeptic stack? Like I don't know. Insight, Reuters. Um, I don't know. We're extremely surprised by Hamas' capacities this time around. They've long-distance rockets they didn't have before. It's all down to Iran. Does that mean that they're not water pipes if they're like totally different rockets? Accuracy rate, short range, unsophisticated, homemade, metal tubing, metal pipes. Use detritus from Israeli missiles. Huh, interesting. Think about that. Those those Hamas rockets are made from Israeli missiles. Wow, okay. Well, stop shooting missiles at them, I guess. I'm just gonna put this in the chat.
I think part of that is like the missiles that are being shot at them, and then supplies from other countries.
I wanna get some picture. I need to do like a deep dive on this because this is something that comes up over and over again, and I think it's a pretty important point. This question of how much of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is due to Hamas diverting aid, diverting fuel, resources, ripping up water pipes. I hear these things a lot, but I've never seen a source for any of that, other than like these kind of like anecdotes, like maybe they did this, they do it, but the question is like, is this like 1% of the issue? Is this 50% of the issue? Is this 80% of the issue? Water pipes, like somebody said that they used water pipes that were like not in use anymore from some like disused area. But I've never seen something that says like the frequency or prevalence of this. Dug up from abandoned Israeli settlements. This discovery turned out to be a qualitative leap. These pipes, which stretch from the liberated settlements in the west across the Israeli border to the east, had been hidden from the eyes for years. They served Israel in its theft of Palestinian water. In the belly of the earth, we found large quantities of thick metal pipes. It was part of a network that had been used to steal Gaza's groundwater, pump it into the occupied lands. We discovered plans for this network, dug into the ground, pulled up the pipes that could be used in our military industries. So these are pipes from Israeli settlements. I don't know. I think I'm gonna treat this as like, until somebody can validate this, I'm gonna treat this as like unsubstantiated.
Okay, so I got a question around some of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, in my conversations with Wick, I've tried to point out my dissatisfaction with the terrorist label and how that might be applied.
Okay.
And you can look this up on Wikipedia. We can all be Wikipedia level warriors right now. But there's at least two countries, I think one of them is Paraguay, I don't remember the other one, that have partially labeled Hamas as a terrorist organization, specifically their military wing versus their civil services wing.
Sure.
I don't know a whole lot about their civil services wing. So they got to be doing something for people there. Because like Al-Shifa Hospital, for example, I think a lot of their civil servants were like medics, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I think at the point that Hamas was like initially elected, aside from saying they would violently resist, they were doing a lot within the community, and this is not atypical, the Taliban. I was thinking not Al Qaeda. The Taliban like does community infrastructure stuff. Gangs in probably Mexico, gangs maybe more historically across America have had infrastructure roles. So it's not quite as simple as like, you know, just doing crime or just doing, you know, terrorist activity in a place where there isn't good kind of local governmental infrastructure. This is where extremist or criminal or terrorist groups can take over some of those roles. And I think that's what happened a lot in Gaza.
There's another portion to this. I don't know about tunnels being built in the West Bank. I don't know if that's as widespread. But when I think about this topic of conversation, I think it usually relates to the Strip. If they're ripping up like pipes for water that go into the Strip, well, wouldn't that just make them easier to find? All of the resources that I know that go into the Strip go through Israel first. At least that's how I understand it.
Wait, can you explain a little bit more about that? How would that make them easier to find?
So Israel shut off the water to the Strip, right? At the beginning of this.
Yeah.
I think it was Quibbles who said this, but if they're ripping up water pipes to make these tunnels at the Strip, wouldn't that make it easier to find?
Oh, because they're wherever they are is necessarily somewhere that like water pipes were laid?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. I've never thought about that. Yeah.
Anyway, just a thought. You can go on.
Yeah. I think so at least part of the claim is saying that they're using materials from water pipes, or that either from ripping up water pipes or materials that were supposed to be used for water pipes and using those to build tunnels, which I'm sure that has to happen some amount, but I don't like people using that as an argument to say, oh, actually Gazans are not having a humanitarian aid crisis because of anything to do with Israel. It's because of Hamas. I want to see that substantiated, because that's like the go-to that I hear, and I look it up, and I need to spend some time doing a deep dive on that, because that just keeps coming up, and it's a pretty relevant point. You know, to what degree is Hamas right? You can say that Hamas is culpable for a lot of humanitarian issues because, you know, at the very least, the fact that they might divert some aid could mean that a huge amount of aid is not being let in. Like, that's an argument that I think is like probably very strong. But to say that aid that is coming in is primarily diverted by Hamas is either something that I've seen countered by Germany and Qatar, or unsubstantiated, other than, digging up pipes from an Israeli settlement, which is, I don't know. And it also seems like how secretly are they doing this? Because, you know, Gaza Strip is pretty small. If Hamas, which is like, you know, 40,000 people or something, is like digging up all the water pipes and people aren't getting water, it seems like Palestinians, you know, it seems like Gazans would know about that and they'd be pretty angry at Hamas about it, right? So is this like a super secret thing that's happening, or it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't totally, it seems strange.
Indian children.
Okay, I want to hear some other people as well.
Working on their own economy.
I want to hear Quibbles. I understand that you're very passionate about this, but I want to hear other people's opinion on the ceasefire as well. Okay, and I want to just kind of go around. I know Goats wanted to say something on ceasefire. Why do you oppose? Like, it sounds like you oppose the ceasefire. Is that true?
Well, I think the talk about the ceasefire is basically just putting all the responsibility on Israel. It's like, I mean, come on, there are other players in this game. I mean, why the hell is it only up to us? Okay, why is all the
Well, the
responsibility
argument would
upon
be
us?
that you have
Okay?
the majority of the power in the situation, right? That you, if
I
Israel,
wouldn't
to be
say
clear,
so. I wouldn't say so. I think Hamas has an insane amount of power with the fact that they have our hostages, okay? They have an insane amount of power. And if they didn't have that many hostages, maybe we could reach a ceasefire. Maybe it was like the situation was less severe than it is right now. But, you know, I think that...
Yeah. I don't know if I'm missing something. It doesn't seem obvious to me that having leverage makes it harder to get a ceasefire. I don't... Yeah. Right, because part of the terms of the ceasefire were release of hostages. So that just doesn't check out for me.
The blame is misplaced, okay? Because the talk about ceasefire is just like, okay, that's just Israel's fault. Israel, again, it's Israel. We're doing everything to the opposed, like to the conquered, like Palestinians, and we're the bad guys, okay? And and it's supposed to be our responsibility. I don't know. It's just the talks about. 1 second. Yeah. So the talks about responsibility towards Israel. 1 second. Hold on.
No, take your time.
Okay,
we'll
continue.
Get back to you. Jason, ceasefire or no?
Absolutely not. I think that the double standard imposed on Israel compared to any other country in the entire world is absolutely baffling. The fact that we are not only, there's like the concept of, that there are laws of war and that there are, war may be immoral, but you can do your best to not, to minimize collateral damage, right? But what is being asked of Israel is to value the innocent citizens of another country over their own. That the hostages, huh?
They do.
I know that they do, but this is at a level that is unparalleled. That you should be able to. Yeah.
Like before you move forward, Israel tomorrow has the capacity to carpet bomb all of Gaza. If they wanted to do that, they could do it, and it would mean that many fewer IDF soldiers were going to die. But instead, they're doing this thing that is definitely going to result in many more IDF soldiers dying, and they're doing it explicitly because, unlike Hamas, they actually do care about innocent Gazan civilians.
They absolutely, I absolutely think that they do. But I think that so maybe I should rephrase. Not just that they're being asked to put the lives of civilians on the other side above theirs, but to put it so far above theirs to an entirely different degree that any other country would ever be asked to do. That 230, 240 hostages, many of whom we still don't even know if they're alive. The Red Cross and the United Nations has completely and abjectly failed in this conflict. The fact that we just have to not, Israel has to not know. We just won't know, and people,
nobody
people
cares.
and nobody cares, and no one will ever. We may never know. Hamas doesn't have to commit to anything. They don't have to commit to giving back any of them, and we still have
nobody
to.
takes them accountable.
Can I jump in real quick? I think what needs needs to happen, in my opinion, is that no, we can't have a ceasefire. Obviously, we need, and also after we need to stay there until we dismantle the overwhelming power Hamas has over Gaza. I'll be talking about Gaza specifically, and then either only Israel or every other significant enough power that agrees to it needs to help reform Gaza into a place where Palestinians and any kind of Arab that lives there can have like just a normal human life with education, with food and water. This is not going to happen ever under a government
terrorist
quote
organizations.
Hamas. This is not going to happen, and we in Israel cannot afford to keep providing them the impetus to do another October 7th. This can't happen. This is our incentive, but also this is like, if anyone cares about Palestinians and Arab people in the Middle East, they should be pro us dismantling the power of Hamas and then do whatever we can to reform this place.
And Israel,
like
just real quick,
temple for murder.
Yes, just real quick. Israel will never be free, or I'm sorry, Palestine will never be free, and Israel too. But Palestine will never be free while Hamas exists, right? And if you are out
or
in the
any
streets
other
chanting,
or any other terrorist organization that is in
if you're out in the streets chanting "Free Palestine," but you are not asking for the dismantling of things of groups like Hamas, you don't give a shit about Palestine.
After that,
So, just as a thought exercise, I don't want to make it sound like I'm equating anything, but just as somewhere to start thinking through this question of, can Palestinians ever be free as long as there are Palestinian terrorist organizations? Nelson Mandela, the group that he led, was considered a terrorist organization, and despite that, or because of that, or whatever, those two facts were coexisting, that his group was a terrorist organization and apartheid South Africa, that system was dismantled. There are those aren't identical situations. I'm not saying that they are, but this question of it's like Palestinians just need to chill the fuck out and just get bombed for a while, and then everything could be cool if they just stay cool. I wish that these people on this panel could sound super condescending, because it's implying that they haven't done this or aren't doing this or can't do this. But what I'm not hearing when they're talking about the kind of double standard that they're being held to, the standard of being held to your home and every home around you being bombed, like a lot of your neighbors dying, just total catastrophe in your life, and just being chill. That's a pretty high standard. It's a pretty heavy standard. It's a pretty different standard than most people are held to when it comes to what they're asking for from the people of Gaza. So I wish there was some recognition of that.
Yeah, you were
If they
using
dismantle Hamas and go away, it's just gonna happen again.
And 300 bits, just real quick, let me make mine here. 300, you as Jews, I know you understand. No, that's jokes, please don't. 300 bits from Federal Methodist. 300 bits from Federal Methodist. Here, take my shekels. Thank you. And gang, if you want to give me money, if you want to ask these people questions, if you have comments and things, super chats, throw me bits my way. All these things would be great, right? Like bits, super chats, subs, all these things. I can't do this for free. I do need money to stay afloat, and so please, if you like the stream, please support
Lifesteal's
these values.
amazing.
Anyway, but so Mono, I'll let you finish, but then I want to ask everyone else about the ceasefire too. So.
No, I think I finished. Like, we can't be expected to go out of there and because even if we dismantle Hamas and we just pull off, I mean, the area is so radicalized. No matter who caused it, obviously both Hamas and Israel caused it for many years. But we Israel, at least Israel, has the responsibility to make a difference now. It can't go on.
Stat teams, ceasefire.
I think generally, I mean, ceasefire with no other, like, it's a way to maintain your moral, like, high ground to call for a ceasefire. I think that, I mean, we've had dozens of ceasefires between Israel and Palestine in the past, and it's it's just a continuation of the same violence. Like, that's not an actual
it's a procrastination.
That's not, yeah. So any sort of solution is going to have to be a little bit more thoughtful, and yeah, I don't know. A ceasefire it's such an easy thing to throw around, but I don't think it's going to solve anything. I think it's just delaying just another attack.
Also, I would also say sorry, quickly. You can ceasefire, just give us every single hostage. It's actually pretty simple.
But I will say
it's pretty simple.
Ceasefire, no.
Well, no, for one. But whenever I hear ceasefire on its face, I'm just like, that's so foolish. Like, what are you even saying right now? Like, so the only thing I think Israel would get out of the ceasefire is like that little bit of extra like moral standing. But it's like it doesn't even matter. Like, it doesn't matter how moral Israel is right now.
Wait, I mean, yeah, I wish I were on this panel to ask him. It's like, okay, well, you know, if you have a ceasefire, Hamas can regroup. But, you know, let's say they increase their military capacity by like 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever it is. But you save, you know, tens of thousands of civilian lives in Gaza. You know, is that a consideration, right? Is that something that you get? Is that something that you care about, something that you're cognizant of? I don't. Some people will call that naive. That just seems stupid to me to call that naive. Like, why shouldn't that be something that you should care about?
Well, yeah, we do, but like, no one really cares. And then what's that give Hamas more time to do? Just like prepare, rearm, refit. Like,
well, then again, it's giving like then again, like just well for Palestinian refugees in the south of Gaza, I think a ceasefire is very attractive thing. Yes, like they get more humanitarian like support and everything. They have like they can take a deep breath. I guess. Okay, so it's not just the point of the ceasefire is not. Let's not focus only on how it benefits or doesn't benefit Israel.
Wow.
There's another side in this conflict too that benefits from a ceasefire. That's why I think lots of people are advocating for a ceasefire. Okay, because there are people that are like homeless in the south of Gaza that are like that need humanitarian help and they need a ceasefire. Okay, so
yeah, for those people, I wish they could get the reprieve that they're due or owed. But like, I just don't know what to tell them. Like,
why cancel this? Just acknowledge that this side exists. Just acknowledge that this side exists. You can't deny its existence.
No, you're right. But the solution to that is a short-term ceasefire in particular components, but not the totality of Gaza, which is exactly what unilaterally, just to the one side, Israel has done repeatedly in order to help try to get people to go south. The problem is that explicitly, Hamas is not just telling people, but forcing people to stay in northern Gaza because they want to use.
Well, yes, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that when you give like when you're talking about a ceasefire, you're forgetting why are people advocating for it, and it's not just like. Israel, okay? Just say acknowledge the fact that there's another side of this conflict. Just acknowledge it. Don't deny it. Just think about. Just say that it's there. Okay.
I think I fundamentally disagree.
Rafi hasn't got to speak on this yet. So Rafi,
there's a big issue that there's a big issue that all of the
Quibbles,
Let me finish.
stop.
She
No,
was talking
Quibbles.
to me.
Rafi hasn't gone yet. Rafi hasn't gone yet.
Uh,
Rafi hasn't even answered the question.
Yeah.
Rafi gets to go.
There's a
and
big
then we
issue that
can-
we're all talking, or I mean, most people that are talking about a ceasefire are talking about it with zero military understanding of what that means. Someone who calls for a ceasefire, I'm gonna say this and then I'll explain it. Calling for a ceasefire, you're calling for more Palestinian death. Okay, you are actively and explicitly calling for more Palestinians to die in the course of this conflict. A decade ago, I fought in Gaza. I was there. Okay, we're back there again today. And the idea that a ceasefire is going to do anything other than prolong the conflict
I
and
know,
have
just
more
saying
people
that that's
die
how they
is
see
insane.
it.
I understand, and that's what I'm trying to say.
I know it
They
doesn't
see
have
it
actual
wrong.
benefit. I'm not
It's
saying
not
it
actual
actually
benefit.
has
It
a
has
benefit.
actual
I'm
harm.
just saying that yeah, okay.
A ceasefire,
But
a
that's not
ceasefire
how
allows
everybody
Hamas.
sees it.
Right.
Other
But
people see
Anthony,
it in
No,
a
but
different
we
way.
ceasefire allows
understand
Hamas.
their statements, and we understand where
You
they come
don't
from.
say if you don't acknowledge
Okay,
it.
yeah, I would love to hear this guy elaborate on this point because I haven't heard this perspective, and I would definitely like to.
It doesn't
We
seem
do.
like you
There's
understand.
nothing
That's
to it.
exactly what I'm
You know,
saying.
someone can be insane, and I'll acknowledge that they're insane, but I'm not going to validate it. They're wrong. There's no worth to what
I
they're saying.
just think
It's not
in
a
a
worth
talk about
while
ceasefire,
opinion.
you should have
but
like a point of
that's right.
view of the other side as well. Okay,
It's fine.
Obviously,
that's
they
all
have
I'm
short
saying.
term
And
and-
there
What I
wasn't one
understand,
until I said it.
It's fine. I understand
I think
why
it
they
is
say
right
it. But
here.
the issue is that if Hamas has time to fortify, then the conflict
Okay,
becomes
that's
long.
not the
And the
problem.
biggest factor that determines how many civilians are going to die in a conflict is how
We all
long the
agree.
conflict
I
is.
don't know why you're
Yeah, we all
arguing.
agree.
The
We all
point is
agree.
that what Goat is saying here, I think, is correct. That there is a rightful focus on the fact that the truth is that Hamas is horrible for Israel, but Hamas is a lot worse for Gazans than it is for Israelis. And the truth is that when we're talking about the very real problems that are being faced, again, not just post October 7th, but prior to October 7th, as a result of Hamas terrorist dictatorship ruling over the Gazan people, the result of that is that, of course, they're experiencing this horrible situation. And yes, Israel has in the past and will in the future made these decisions that are designed to protect Palestinian people, Gazan people, at the cost of their own safety, at the cost of their own soldiers, at the cost of a lot of things. And so that's why they've done these unilateral partial ceasefires of particular components of corridors to help try to get people south. But the problem is that, like, there's only so much you can do when Hamas is explicitly, sometimes at gunpoint, and always, at least publicly stating that people should stay in the north and that people shouldn't flee because they want them to be used as human shields.
Can I address the human shields? Because
I'm just against. Okay, I'm just against one-sided conversations. Okay,
No, I agree with you.
that was
No.
my whole point. Okay,
You're
no,
exactly
I-
everybody on the other side of the
you're-
seas, I think.
like the way we like we talked about the ceasefire was just completely one-sided, and
No, I agree.
Some
I agree.
conversations are, I'm sorry,
Okay.
some conversations are one-sided. Right? Someone tells me 1 + 1 is 3. It doesn't. There's no conversation to be had.
It sounds like we all mostly agree on this. Just
No,
to
it sounds like
put
Goat-
conversation-
you can't take.
It's not like
it as-
multiple
Okay, we're getting
people
trapped.
are
Yeah,
We're
she was right.
getting
That's all
stuck.
I'm saying.
Stop. We're getting
Yeah.
stuck on this. I want to unstuck us.
Palestinian people.
I want to unstick us. I want to unstick us, and I want to go to Staxium. Because Staxium hopefully will unstick us a little bit.
Yeah, no, I have a question because I've heard this. Here's how. I mean, look. Let's say like a rapist / mass murderer starts going through the streets and picks up a baby to hide himself from gunpoint or something. Obviously, we can agree that is probably one of the most evil fucking human beings on planet Earth. My question is does that justify someone shooting at that person anyway? And like, I think
So the
that
answer-
yeah. go
Well,
ahead.
I would say
Yes.
I want to answer this first because I have strong opinions about this. If they are actively killing other people, why they have that shield? Yes.
Yeah, so the answer is
Sickening. It's
that,
gross, but it's not your fault that you've been put in that position, right? It's not the IDF's fault that they've been put in this position. It's explicitly Hamas's fault, right? And the blame,
I agree with
primarily,
you.
not always, right? Because I do believe the IDF doesn't take enough care, but in general, right? It's Hamas's fault because Hamas has put them in a situation where they can either risk
I agree,
killing
Hamas's fault.
risk
So the
killing the
critical
baby
possible
shield
situation.
or risk Hamas murdering that other baby, right? That's over there that they're currently stabbing, right?
So the parallel that I would give is
Mhm.
prior to 9/11, it was generally the belief that if terrorists take over a plane, that you should let them do it, and you should just let them and put your hands up, and whatever they tell you to do, just do
Sure.
it, and hopefully that will allow you to get to be able to get there to safety. And the reason for that is because there was a presumption that the worst case scenario when there's a hostile takeover of a plane is that everyone on the plane ends up dead. Then on 9/11, we realized that is not the worst case scenario. And I think similarly, in the case of Hamas in Gaza, the worst case scenario of people that they are hiding behind being killed, we have come to the realization that that is not the worst case scenario. That there is something that is far worse than that. And that we saw that on October 7th, but we've also seen it, again, the vast majority of the problem that Hamas represents is not to Israelis, is not to the people in Israel proper. It is to the Gazan people. It is to the people who they have had a dictatorial control over for 17 years, over whom they have stolen $11 billion from people who don't have access to fresh drinking water because they are pulling up the pipes.
Wait, okay, that's a source, or that's a specific claim. Maybe that's something I can. Okay, what are you saying?
Control over for 17 years, over whom they have stolen $11 billion from people.
Okay, 11. Hamas leaders worth $11 billion live luxury lives in Qatar. Okay, I mean that sounds like this is New York Post. Is there any? Fatah official accuses Hamas of stealing $700 million from Gazans. Wait, okay. Stole tens of millions of dollars. $11 billion? Not allotting reconstruction funds. Hamas leader's worth 11 billion, revel in luxury. I just want to see some like source for this. Sons of Hamas leader lounges in a hotel suite in Qatar. I just want like a non-New York post for this. Do they cite anything? Wait. Continued to rule until 2017 before ending Qatar. Worth more than $4 billion. Yeah. Where do those funds come from? Payroll, kickback schemes, indirectly through social services, government operations that help Hamas maintain political control over Gaza. Where did that money come from? Because Germany was specifically saying that they did an investigation and reconstruction funds or their development funds weren't misallocated. Okay. Clearly, this is my next deep dive I need to do.
People who don't have access to fresh drinking water because they are pulling up the pipes in order to make rockets, in order to shoot those rockets while hiding behind kids. So, like, yeah, at this point, yeah, when there's a Hamas terrorist, we got to kill the Hamas terrorist. And the truth is that, like, right now, Israel isn't even doing that, right? Israel right now is still doing regularly knocks before they end up shooting down known places that are harboring. I shouldn't even say harboring, because again, it's not like these people have a choice of whether or not the Hamas terrorists are going to be there. But Hamas people are there, and we know that there are Hamas people there, and yet we're still doing knocks. Israel is still making the decision to give warning so that those innocent civilians can escape. But the truth is that the implication of that is that the Hamas terrorists are also going to escape, and that means they're going to do it again and again and again and again for the next decade. And so this is the point where I get to the point where, like, yeah, at this point there needs to be an invasion. At this point there needs to be an occupation, because the truth is that Hamas needs to get out of power. They need to no longer have control over the innocent Gazan people.
Okay. Yeah, I love that he said that. Needs to be out of power. That's a much more reasonable goal than hunting down and killing every single member of Hamas, which is what he said earlier. Hamas out of control, I think, is a much more reasonable goal. Can be accomplished potentially in different ways. I don't know if anybody at this point is going to bring up how much Netanyahu specifically supported Hamas because they want to undermine the Palestinian Authority. I don't know if that's going to become relevant.
Because the result of that is not just this
supported
one
them getting
moment
funds
where they have, are hiding behind these civilians, but rather that they have 2.2 million hostages that they are using as a weapon of war.
Hiding out in Qatar
until the point that we stop them from being able to.
Can I add something to that? I think people don't understand that
yes,
in a situation where there's an occupation in Gaza, which I support, by the way. I'm talking about an occupation in a positive sense, like we were talking about. People don't understand that if the IDF, for example, does that, the IDF, in my opinion at least, it should be the case that they would protect the civilians there the same way they protect the Israeli citizens from Hamas. They would not just like Israel would not. The IDF would not operate in the same way Hamas does if there's an occupation.
What
in
do
Gaza,
you say though, Mono? But what do you say though to and I've had this argument, right? And they've presented evidence that there has been atrocities committed by the IDF on Palestinian civilians, right? Not Hamas.
Yeah, there has been.
Right? So when you say things like when we occupy Gaza, we will treat the Palestinians fairly, you can understand why someone might be a little skeptical of that, correct?
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it's correct, but we'll definitely treat them better than Hamas, and I think that there should be a lot of pressure on the IDF to treat them better than they had until now, if we're gonna occupy Gaza, because it's for our benefit too, and we have to treat them right.
So I made a
But
video.
I think it's important. We have to talk.
What occupation would look like. So I had a debate with Wonderbox and Destiny about this subject, about whether or not there should be an occupation. But then after I went into a lot more detail in it. And yeah, I think that the solution has to be, one, there has to be a recognition that obviously, though horrible, the situation in Area C is infinitely better as an average member of the public, Arab member of the public, Palestinian member of the public, than it is to be in Gaza under Hamas. That's the number one starting point. The number two starting point is that doesn't mean that Area C is good, and so there has to be a fundamental belief that as soon as you get to that Area C type style occupation of Gaza, immediately, both in Area C of the West Bank as well as in the totality of Gaza, there needs to be elections, and those elections need to not allow Hamas to be a part of it. But the reality is that the people are probably going to elect people who are very radical, and that needs to be a civil control, but it can't be military control.
But that points to something that Rafi said. I want to get Rafi's opinion on this too, right? Is that right now in Gaza, and in Gaza specifically, if they had elections tomorrow, it'd probably be towards some Hamas-like thing, right? So how do you square that circle, right? We recognize that they have been so radicalized by their education system and things like that right now. Can we, how feasible are elections at this point, right? Wouldn't it just perpetuate the problem?
Yes. Unironically, no elections. Unironically, I'm going to meme a little bit. I don't mean this in the literal sense, but re-education camps, right? I mean, kids need to learn that Jews are not demons, that we're not out to kill them, and that they don't need to sacrifice their lives to kill us. And I mean, there's no squaring that circle, right? And this also applies to Israelis. I think actually one of the biggest things that is necessary is mandatory cross-language education. Israeli children must be required to learn Arabic, and Palestinian children must be required to learn Hebrew. Right now, Israelis cannot even communicate with Palestinians. There's no way to even have a dialogue because we don't speak the same language. This is just a practicality. But we must have education, but education across all boundaries, across all paradigms. That is the starting point. There has to be intergenerational change within society.
Okay. So the linguistic component of that I fully agree with. If you're talking about in terms of Israel proper, but if you're talking about in terms of the West Bank or in terms of
I'm talking about all of the areas. Yes. Palestinians must, even outside of Israel, must be required to learn Hebrew. There's no way we'll have peace if they aren't.
When you're talking about West Bank and Gaza, there needs to be an understanding that we're trying to get to a trajectory where those are an independent country. And getting to that trajectory where they're an independent country, I think requires that there be an understanding that in civil matters, they need to be in control. And that doesn't mean that they're going to come to the same conclusions that I would. It doesn't mean they're going to come to conclusions that I wish that they were going to. But if we're talking about military control, absolutely, military control at this point needs to be in the hands, particularly in Gaza, of the IDF, which is unfortunate, but it's a reality. But in terms of civil control, we need to get to a trajectory where it is both one, democratic, but also two, democratically elected Palestinians in control of what will eventually be an independent Palestinian state.
Okay, so I think that's simply not possible in a world where today 70% of Palestinians support armed fighting against us. There's no world in which any Israeli, there's no world in which any Israeli is comfortable with a sovereign Palestinian state that has control over their own military and civil affairs.
I agree.
But that's the thing. So there can be no movements towards civil governance. I know the trajectory starts. The trajectory starts with education.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're talking about the same thing there. I mean, if any group sees themselves, let's start from the basics. If any group is occupied, we generally across the world accept that group has a right to even like violent armed resistance. That's like a general right that we accept. So if it's the case that Palestinians are occupied, then they do have that right to armed resistance. I mean, maybe this is like, I'm American, and that's how we won our freedom, was through armed resistance and rebellion and revolution. So that's like, I guess that's my lens on things.
Holy smokes! Did you just say they have a right to resist?
Yes, I did. I mean, okay, so technically I was hyper careful and I said, if it's the case that they're occupied, then they have that right.
Well, no, I mean, it's an actual thing. The right to resist, it's not in every country. Supposedly Germany has it. You could look it up, again, Wikipedia level, but it was a provision in the Magna Carta.
Wait, oh yeah, are you talking about like Second Amendment stuff, or I was talking more just like general ideological?
The Magna Carta was like a document between warlords. It was kind of a pretext to the Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. It's actually pronounced manga.
Manga.
And it was created in Japan. So check your white privilege.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the case that Palestinians are occupied, they have the right to resistance. In apartheid South Africa, Nelson Mandela's organization was considered a terrorist organization. They were still able to be successful and dismantle the apartheid system. So I don't see this as being like the kind of everybody wants to say, oh, the other group has to figure their stuff out, like will we'll do our stuff once they do their stuff. Nobody wants to take that first step. I think everybody has to take the first step. And also, I can't help but feel like Israel has more first steps that it can take.
Yeah.
Whether or not it should or whatever, I don't know. But it does feel like they have more options of what they could possibly do. But, yeah.
And it doesn't start with their own civil governance. It cannot start with their own elections where they just vote in Islamic Jihad or some other secondary party that's just going to do the exact same
Getting
thing.
to that trajectory, I think, requires that first we allow the Palestinian people themselves, and particularly the Gazan people themselves, to realize, holy shit, this is not the only possibility, right? And that's why the military control is absolutely crucially in the hands of the IDF. But in terms of the civil control, yes, the truth is that for the first decade, it's going to be horrible, and they're not going to make particularly that much progress. You're right. But if you're going to get that second decade, you're going to get that second decade where they all of a sudden new people are able to come, again, genuinely elected, new people are able to come to power 10, 15 years down the line, and those people are able to be real progressives who genuinely do want to see peace happen, and also dually genuine Palestinians who genuinely are Muslims and genuinely do care about those facets as well. For that to happen, there has to be democracy first, and that democracy can't be tainted by a sense in which it is undergirdingly controlled civilly by Israel.
Okay. Gang, I want to respect everyone's time here. We've gone for about 2 hours now. I want to give everyone a chance to have closing statements, tell people who you are.
Almost.
For those of you who'd like to stay a little longer, I will be opening up this call. So if you want to ask a Jewish person about this situation, gang, and you are in here, and you're in one of my chats, whether it be YouTube or Twitch or Kick, feel free to jump in my Discord and jump backstage. I can pull you on.
Hashtag Ask a Jew.
I wasn't going to make that joke. But anyway, first and foremost, where can people find you? Just be brief, concise. Closing thoughts, where people can find you, etc. If you need to go, I understand. If you'd like to stay, we appreciate it. Let's start with Go. Go ahead.
Skip me. I'll be last.
Jason, go ahead.
Hopefully you can't find me anywhere because there have been too many threats all over the place towards Jews, so I'm going to keep it at that.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for risking it all to come on a Wick.
I appreciate it.
Mono, go ahead.
You can find me at Monokuro the Demon on Twitch and at Mono the Demon on Twitter. And Monokuro on YouTube.
Check them out, gang. Stack Teams.
Stack Teams everywhere. TikTok, YouTube. That's about it. Thanks.
Silverhand.
Yeah, you can't really find me anywhere. I don't have a channel. All I kind of do is just fuck around on Twitter. Doesn't really matter.
Quibbles.
At QuibblesC on Twitter, also at QuibblesC on YouTube. On YouTube, I have made a video already about West Bank settlements, also one already on the Gaza Strip and sort of how that trajectory can be made. And I'm also currently working on one which is going to be about left-wing anti-Semitism and specifically about Stockdown Left.
Interesting. Stockdown Left, friend of the channel. We'll see how that goes. But thank you for coming, and yeah, we'll talk to you when we can.
Oh wait, yeah. So you can find me anywhere. But it doesn't matter.
Okay, fair enough. Rafi, go ahead.
Like others have said, I can't be found anywhere, but looking forward to a day when we get peace.
I too look forward to the day. Gang, you're asking, will I have a Palestinian voice this thing? Yes, if Palestinians want to come, not Arabs, right, but Palestinians specifically want to come on my show to talk about their issues. Yes, absolutely.
Well, wait. Why not Arabs or Muslims? If there's like claims of Islamophobia, why shouldn't they talk about that? Okay, interesting.